what are some of the things that we should keep in mind while designing a nudge-based architecture? So let's take a detailed look of how to design these choice architecture. Take a look at the door on your screen. Do you think the door should be pulled or should it be pushed in order to open it? What are some of the visual cues that we get from it? You can see the two rings on the door, and these two rings give us the suggestion that the door should be pulled using those two rings. Now, if it turns out that the door should be pushed behind in order to open it, there will be a lot of confusion from the end user's part. The visual stimulus or the visual cue that we are getting is that of pulling the door. However, the door has to be pushed. So there is a conflict between the natural cue that we are getting and the eventual functionality of the door. These inconsistencies, they lead to inefficiency. People will spend a lot of time trying to pull it when it should be pushed. In other words, a good choice architecture is one where the functionality and the visual cues, they come together. So take a look at the stop sign on the screen. The stop sign usually is on the red background, but here it is on the green background. Is it a useful stop sign? Well, probably not, because the human mind has been conditioned to associate stop with red and go with green. So a green stop sign will also lead to inefficiencies and possibly accidents because the visual cue is inconsistent with the functionality. And these visual cues, they often depend on how our brain processes data. So which color is it? Well, your first instinct will be to say that it's red. Why is that? It's so because we, at least the educated class, they are more likely to read a sentence first or read a word first rather than focus on the color of the word. Which color is it? Here, the word is perfectly consistent with the visual cue that we are getting from the color in which the word is printed. This is again conflicting. We are likely to say it is green because we are drawn towards the text first. However, the color is red. What happens in these cases is that the automatic system reads the word faster than our perception of color, and we are thus likely to face a conflict between the part of the brain which processes the color and the part of the brain which reads the words. These are some of the things that we should keep in mind while designing nudges. So this example is again taken from Richard Thaler's book. So think about the gas stove design on the right top. Which button should we turn on to fire up one of the burners? It's very confusing. The design that you see in the middle is perhaps easier, where the button and the burner, they are consistent in terms of the design. The one that you see at the very bottom is perhaps the easiest, where an end user is easily able to figure out which button is associated with which burner. So we must remember that the users of these objects are human, and humans have limitations and frailties, and we, the designers of the choice architecture, should keep in mind these limitations of the humans and better design products and services. The principle that we should keep in mind is automated system should not be confused with the visual cues that we give from our designs. We have seen from the past applications that human beings are considerably influenced by the default system. That is because we often take the path of the least resistance. We are more likely to say that, look, whatever, it's fine, yeah, whatever, the status quo bias. So, default is the option that one takes when the person actively chooses nothing. It is important to note that in many choice architecture, default is in some way inevitable. Generally, when we do nothing, what happens? Nothing happens. But there are other instances where something does happen when the default is chosen. So think of airport trolleys. When you don't do anything, what happens? The trolleys are in a brake mode. You, the passenger, will have to press the handrest in order to get the trolley moving. Similarly, that's true with lawnmowers, it's true with computers' lock mode. When we do nothing, the computer locks itself. We have to actively then unlock it. Automatic renewals have been widely used by magazines, by cloud services, by media such as Netflix, etc. So what does Netflix do? Netflix tells you that you subscribe to our services and by default will keep on renewing the service. If you have to get out of the service, you have to actively place a request and only then can you get out. Now, how should we interpret automatic choices is often a matter of subjective perceptions. There have been controversies around it. In the US, the No Child Left Behind policy had one such controversy. According to this policy, the names, addresses, telephone numbers of students were to be sent to the recruiting offices of armed forces. In other words, a secondary school student or the parent of the student may request that the student's name, address, telephone number listing not be released without prior written parental consent, and the local educational agency or the private school should notify parents of the option to make a request and shall comply with any request. So this was the statement that was issued by the notice, official notice. Now, some school districts, they interpreted this as an opt-in policy. Parents could notify if they wanted information to be sent. For example, Fairport, New York. However, the then Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, interpreted this as an opt-out policy. He thought that his preferred interpretation was that students by default had to give their details, and it is only when an active choice was being made by either the student or the parent that they could be given an exception. And he circulated a notice which read, "Do not permit LEAs or local educational agencies to institute a policy of not providing the required information unless a parent has affirmatively agreed to provide the information." While default has been widely used in policy contexts, it is often a matter of subjective interpretation about what the true default is, and that can generate controversies.